The Tower of London, the prison that held kings, queens, and their own executioners. Two young princes went into the Tower of London and never came out. Nobody knows what happened to them for over 500 years. Their own uncle likely had them killed. When workers found two small skeletons hidden inside a staircase 2 centuries later, they still weren't entirely sure they'd found the right bodies. The Tower of London, constructed beginning in 1078 under William the Conqueror shortly after his conquest of England, served for centuries not as a single-purpose prison, but as a royal fortress, palace, treasury, and, when circumstances required it, a place of imprisonment and execution for some of the most powerful and prominent figures in English history, a genuinely unusual combination of purposes that meant the Tower's prisoners frequently included people who had, until very recently, held enormous political power themselves. Among the Tower's most enduring and unsettling mysteries involves the disappearance of the princes in the Tower, 12-year-old King Edward V and his 9-year-old brother Richard, who were placed in the Tower in 1483 following their father's death, ostensibly for their own protection and in preparation for Edward's upcoming coronation, under the guardianship of their uncle Richard, Duke of Gloucester, who had been named Lord Protector during Edward's minority. Rather than proceeding with his nephew's coronation, Richard instead had the boys formally declared illegitimate, based on disputed claims regarding their father's earlier marriage contract, clearing his own path to the throne, and was crowned King Richard III shortly afterward. The two young princes were seen playing within the Tower grounds in the weeks following their uncle's coronation, according to contemporary accounts. But these sightings gradually became less frequent, and by the end of 1483 the boys had vanished from any further confirmed historical record entirely. Contemporary and near-contemporary accounts, though written with varying degrees of political bias given the ongoing dynastic conflict of the era, widely assumed the boys had been murdered, most commonly attributing responsibility directly to their uncle, now King Richard, who possessed both clear motive, eliminating potential rival claimants to the throne he now held, and direct means, since the boys remained under his direct guardianship and physical control within the Tower at the time of their disappearance. Richard's own reign proved brief, ending just 2 years later in 1485 when he was killed in battle by the forces of Henry Tudor, who then took the throne as Henry VII, founding the Tudor dynasty. Henry, who had genuine political incentive of his own to portray his predecessor as a murderous usurper to help legitimize his own contested claim to the throne, never definitively resolved the prince's fate either, and the specific truth of what actually happened to them has remained a genuinely disputed historical mystery for over 5 centuries since. The mystery deepened considerably in 1674, nearly 2 centuries after the boys' disappearance, when workers renovating a staircase within the Tower discovered a wooden box containing 2 small human skeletons hidden beneath the stairs, remains that were widely, though never with complete forensic certainty, assumed at the time to belong to the missing princes, given their approximate size and the specific location matching historical accounts, suggesting the boys may have been buried somewhere within the Tower grounds following their deaths. King Charles II ordered the remains formally reinterred at Westminster Abbey, where they remain today, though repeated requests over subsequent centuries by historians seeking modern forensic and DNA analysis to definitively confirm the remains' identity have consistently been denied by the reigning monarch and the Abbey itself, meaning the specific scientific confirmation that could potentially resolve the mystery once and for all has never actually been permitted to occur, leaving even this seemingly conclusive physical evidence in a permanent state of historically probable, but never scientifically confirmed, certainty. Beyond the prince's disappearance, the tower's long history as a place of imprisonment produced numerous other documented, well-recorded tragedies involving genuinely prominent historical figures. Anne Boleyn, King Henry VIII's second wife, was imprisoned within the tower in 1536 on charges of adultery and treason, widely regarded by modern historians as fabricated to clear the way for Henry's next marriage, and was executed by beheading on the tower grounds, reportedly specifically requesting an expert swordsman be brought from France to ensure a swift, less painful death than the more common execution acts typically provided. Sir Walter Raleigh, the prominent English explorer and courtier, spent over a decade imprisoned within the tower under King James I, during which time he was permitted, in a genuinely unusual arrangement for a tower prisoner, to live in relatively comfortable quarters with his wife and children, and used his lengthy imprisonment productively to write a substantial portion of his historical works, before eventually being released, sent on a final expedition, and ultimately executed following that expedition's failure. The tower also served notably as the site of Britain's last official execution during the Second World War, when German spy Joseph Jacobs was executed by firing squad within the tower grounds in 1941, representing the final use of the tower's historical role as an execution site after centuries of prominent documented use for exactly this purpose. What makes the Tower of London endure as one of history's most historically significant and genuinely unsettling locations isn't simply the sheer volume of documented tragedy that occurred within its walls across nearly 1,000 years of continuous use, but the specific, unusual pattern underlying so many of its most famous prisoners, individuals who had recently held or remained closely connected to genuine political power, imprisoned not as ordinary criminals, but as direct casualties of the same royal and political systems that had, until very recently, elevated them to prominence in the first place. The Tower of London remains today one of Britain's most visited historical sites, its grounds walked by millions of tourists annually, most standing, whether they realise it or not, within feet of locations where kings ordered the deaths of their own family members, queens were executed on invented charges, and 2 young princes disappeared so completely that even the partial physical evidence eventually recovered has never been permitted the modern scientific examination that might finally, definitively resolve what actually happened to them. If stories like this, where even physical evidence sitting in plain sight for centuries has never been allowed to fully solve the mystery, are exactly what you come here for, subscribe to The Grave Details, because history holds more stories like this than most people will ever know.